Well, hello everybody. This is Eddie Speed. We have a great training session today, and to help me with that process, Note School's head of curriculum, Mr. Kevin Shortell. Kevin, welcome.
Hey Eddie, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm great. So Kevin and I really talk a lot about, the idea of how to get somebody to think creatively about notes, and we think that every real estate investor absolutely positively has to understand something about notes, and the more a real estate investor understands and the more that they have a vision of creativity, they can make deals that otherwise wouldn't have worked. And there's kind of two ways to make money in real estate: buy low, sell high. And the other way is to use various creative techniques of financing and leveraging and all kind of different things to create or cash flow out of a transaction other than just buy low, sell high. And this, I think, the curriculum that Kevin has put together today on this case study is really a great example of some students that are smart, that kind of came to us initially as just pure real estate investors, and I don't think there's any doubt that they took it to the moon and showing what you could do with some specialized knowledge. So Kevin, with that said, I'm going to let you kind of introduce and lay out the story here.
Yeah, you made a great point in there, and I'll just come about it a different way. I mean, you and I have been in and around real estate and real estate notes for a long time now, and I don't know why the industry always seemed to have this attitude of there's the real property, real estate, and then there's this note thing, that's kind of, there was like this divide for all these years, and I never understood that because, as you and I know, we're just in the financing side of business, and when you can work the financing side with the real property side, there's no doubt that not only are your profit margins going to go up, but the ability to do more deals is going to go up as well. So it's really combining the best of both worlds, and this deal does a good job of showing just that. And you're exactly right. The students who bought this one, they came in to this deal wearing their normal just real estate investor hat, if you will. They weren't really thinking notes in the beginning because they hadn't been trained up enough in that. They didn't have the specialized knowledge. So they came across this property in the Midwest here, and it was a good deal, but their normal methodology is one very common, and I'm sure there's plenty of people listening to us right now that have tried to do deals like this, where they can buy something at a discount, as you said, and then turn around and just flip it to another investor. Let them rehab it, let them rent it, let them finalize what other exit strategy it's going to be. So you're looking at maybe an $8,000 payday on that. And in this deal, that's exactly what they had in mind.
Yeah, to buy low, sell high.
Yeah, very pure and simple. So they were just now starting to get into the note training. They had been to a couple of classes that you did, and what they realized is if they got creative with this, they could make substantially more profit than just those little flips, and that involved the creative financing aspect, which really what the note business is all about. So, and I know this is one of your favorite ones here. They came in and did a lowball offer, and I'm sure there's people on this call that have tried lowball offers. So it gets negotiated up, and then they agree on getting a good price. So initially they came and offered this person $10,000 for this property. Well, as you can imagine, what happens, of course, to most real lowball offers like that on real property? It gets kicked back, right? It gets rejected. And then what they did was counter this offer. So again, the students are buying the property. That's what they wanted to accomplish here. They threw a cash offer out. It got rejected. So instead of walking away or countering with more money in cash, they did offer more money, but in terms. And I know you've got some things that you'd like to talk about on that, Eddie.
There's no doubt. I mean, this is a classic example. If I remember correctly, this was an estate deal, wasn't it?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so they were buying it from an estate. Kind of typical deal. The guy inherited it, and he didn't really need the money. He probably got a executive job or something, and whatever it is, he didn't need the money. This was mom and daddy's old house that they probably paid for and lived in for 40 years. Sweet little house. You can just see that by looking at it. But the reality is so he got stuck on a price. He put it out there and says, I want 17, and he really had no idea what he was going to do if he didn't sell it. But the truth of the matter is, Kevin, if he didn't get 17, he probably wasn't going to play.
Right.
And so they're like, no problem, we'll pay you the price you want. And so they crafted a different way to go about the deal instead of just trying to buy it for cash at a low price. And they said, sure, if we can pay you the price you want, if you give us the terms we want. And he was like, I'll do it. And there you go. So it sold for 17, 500 down, and then he financed 16.5 for them. He owner financed it for them, and there's the terms.
Right. So they have to make 84 payments of 236, and when, you look at this and go, this makes so much more sense for our students, because when you look at this, they're only out of the pocket $500. And then they have to make $236 a month. Well, to do any kind of light rehab or whatever the plan was at this point in time, they've got the extra cash now to do all that. Where if they had to come out of pocket $17,000 in cash, then it's much more difficult to really make this deal happen for them.
Yeah. So as you said, they kind of in their cycle, they understood. Most real estate investors, understand the job in buying distressed properties is to buy as low as you can, and because that way that's really your profit margin, right? The price you pay for it, it controls your profit at the back end. And they looked at it and they said, man, if we can buy this on terms and our payment is $237 a month, we don't need a calculator. We can make the math work.
Exactly. And this one really, they just did a light cleanup on this. They paid about $500 from somebody to go in there and take out whatever debris and such were left behind, clean it out a little bit, and then they moved forward and resold the property to another investor. And this was one of those investors who wants to buy a rehab or fix it up and then load it with a tenant, which of course makes a lot of sense, specifically today in a lot of different parts of the country where rents are exceedingly high as it pertains to what the price of the property is. So just by getting into this deal, locking up the terms, and then committing to making those monthly payments in short order, after cleaning this house up, they found another investor who would buy the house for $45,000. But also on terms. So they bought the house, our students bought the house on terms, but then they turned around and also sold it on terms for to someone else.
Yeah, it's a classic deal. They're selling the house. If you look at a house that's selling for $45,000 to a consumer, the bank's not going to make a loan on this house, right? It's a non-bankable deal. So this means the buyer to own this house would have to come in and pay all cash. Wait a minute, unless the seller was willing to provide financing for the buyer. Now, Kevin, everybody can run the math here. This house, in their mind, is a great deal because they bought it with a good down payment, $6,750.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't get a mortgage at the bank, and so the Winberries were willing to carry the financing for them and say, you pay us $450 a month and pay us out over 10 years. So they were the bank when the bank was unwilling to make a loan. And the only reason the bank was unwilling to make a loan because they don't want to make a mortgage loan to a consumer for $45,000.
Right. There's no money in those type of loans today with the different government restrictions through DoddFrank and certain state laws. They just can't make enough money to justify doing a loan. They actually lose money on doing a loan that small. So this opens up that opportunity to enable these folks to buy who otherwise just simply wouldn't have been able to purchase. So it looks like this. If we were to diagram this out, and this is just reflection of the principal balance over time. So I'm sure most people on this call are familiar with the amortization schedule, and the amortization schedule simply shows what are the monthly payments. Of that monthly payment, how much is going to principal, how much is going to interest, and what's the UPB, the unpaid balance over time, and that's really what this represents. So when you see the green line and the orange line going down over time, the timeline's on the bottom here, and the principal balance is on the left-hand side. So on both of these loans, over time, the unpaid balance is going down. So really what we have here is a wrap mortgage. It's a wraparound mortgage. The original loan right here that our students are obligated to make the monthly payments on is right here. But they're also receiving payments on the green one. And of course, when we look at these numbers again, because I know it's hard to remember some of those numbers, the payment amount monthly on the green loan here that they're receiving exceeds what they have to pay out on the original loan.
Yeah. So this is a traditional wraparound, and obviously they made some money up front because they got a bigger down payment than they had to make when they bought it, including
Right.
their clean out and repair costs. So they had about $1,000 in it. They got $6,750 down payment, and then every month, as you said, Kevin, the Winberries are receiving $454 a month, and they use a service company to do that, right? They're not doing it themselves.
Right, so the person who they finance, the rehab investor who's going to fix that property up and such, they're obligated on their loan to pay $454 a month. Well, they do that through the servicing company, and then the servicing company can do the disbursement, because the Winberries still have an obligation on the note that they're making payments on. So there'll be a small fee in there. So I went ahead and put the fee in there. You get $454 a month minus $18 leaves a pot of money, if you will, at that month of $436, of which the original seller is going to get their $237. That's what the Winberries are obligated to pay. Our students are obligated to pay. And then any remainder, of course, that extra $200 is just positive cash flow for them.
So they made almost $6,000 up front and $200 a month for 7 years.
Right, and I've got a tally coming up here a little bit to break those numbers down for you. But yeah, that's about right. They made money on the down payment. They got positive cash flow on a property they really don't own anymore, because the new rehab investor owns the property, and they're making positive cash flow on that property.
Cool.
Now here's where the twist comes in.
Sign up for that, Kevin.
What's that?
I'm signing up for that plan.
Yeah, it's a nice one. Yeah, making positive cash flow on something you don't own, and of course you don't own it. You don't have the liability of it. You don't have the landlord. You don't have any of that. It's positive cash flow without the hassles, and you know, really, they were only out, when you think of it, the $500 down payment, a couple months of the $237, and then another $500 for the quick little clean out, just so they could sell it to the rehab investor. So pretty sweet deal. But once again, there was another twist that came into play here, which is really takes it to another level here, if you will, in my opinion. So this is going on. This scenario that everybody's seeing on their screen in front of them right now is going on for several months. The rehab investor's fixing up the house. He's paying $454. Servicing company gets that and divvies out the money accordingly. Well, the original seller, okay, this one here, receiving that $237 a month, the original one that took back that loan, something changed in their life where all of a sudden that monthly payment, it just wasn't enough. So what they did was they called Brian and Michelle, our students, they called them and said, boy, we'd really like to be cashed out of that loan, meaning they wanted to be paid off in full. Okay, the original note holder wanted to be paid off in full. Now, first of all, do Brian and Michelle have to do that? No,
absolutely. It's your choice. Once again, this is a great example of, I say sometimes, Kevin, that gut feel sometimes is bad pizza, and sometimes it's a base of knowledge that enables creativity, right? So their initial structure of this deal was profitable and good, but an opportunity came along that they had a base of knowledge and understood, okay, what if we could do this? And now all of a sudden the guy says, well, what if you could cash me out? Now, do you think Brian and Michelle are going to cash them out at full face amount of the note?
Well, no, they wouldn't, of course, at this stage of the game, and a lot of people don't know they can do that. First of all, just so everybody's familiar with this, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, whoever you might have a loan with, they just can't call on your mortgage and just say, oh yeah, the whole thing's due in full, just out of the blue. If you've been making your payments on time and meeting your commitment, they can't demand that payment in full. And that's essentially what happened here. This lender, if you will, just wanted to be cashed out in full, and Brian and Michelle didn't have to do it, but they had that extra specialized knowledge that said, but wait a minute, if we do pay them off in full, maybe we can do that at a discount, pay them less than the unpaid balance, and that's exactly what they ended up doing. So here's what it looked like. The original note was a 16.5 at the 5.49%, so there's their monthly payments for those 84 months. 5 months have been paid, so the Winberries were paying this out for the 5 months. That left 79 payments remaining, and there was the unpaid principal balance according to the amortization schedule. So they did some quick, ran some numbers on a calculator, looked at the whole deal, and they decided to say, well, we may be willing to pay you off in full this note, but we're not going to pay the full unpaid balance because we really had 79 months left to go before we had to get that down to zero. So we would cash you out today for at $8,300.
And the guy can either take it or not take it, right?
Yeah. And people look at it, well, why in the world would somebody take $8,300 when really the unpaid balance is $15,600? Well, again, the $15,600 is being paid over 79 months. They're getting this money now, and for whatever the reason was, because unless you know, I don't know why they wanted to be cashed out, but what I can always default back to is the pleasure of them getting this $8,300 now was greater than the pain of having to wait to get it over time. That's really, one way we could always look at that. So you bet they accepted it.
Wow. Now what do we do?
Well, now you got to come up with $8,300. So what could they do? They could write a check out of their business account for the $8,300, and that's going to, obviously hit their liquidity for other investments and those sorts of things. But once again, they got creative on this, and they decided, you know what? Instead of us writing a check for $8,300, what else can we do? What else do we own of value? And that, of course, was the note that they were receiving payments on. So what they did was they sold 40 payments of the note that they were receiving payments on to another investor for a total of $15,000.
So when they paid off the underlying note, when the guy that originally inherited the house, who owner financed it for the Winberries, right?
Mm-hmm.
They paid that note off because he agreed to accept $8,300 in lieu of the whole payoff of the note. Then the wrap mortgage became the first lien, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So then they could sell the 40 payments as if the green loan, the top loan, was paid off in full. And then they sold not all of their monthly payments, because remember, they carried it for 10 years, right, at 7.5% interest. They only sold a partial of 40 payments. They sold 40 payments of their remaining 9.5 years. And you say, how'd they come up with 40 months? They just said, we want 15,000.
That's basically right. Yeah, there was no magic math in that one. They just go, well, I don't know, maybe we can sell enough. How many payments do we need to sell to give a good return to an investor? And you can see the investor in blue who bought those 40 payments, they're making a 12% annualized return. I mean, that's really strong. So they looked at this and saying, well, we got to pay this guy $8,300, but why don't we do this? Let's sell enough to get $15,000, give a good return to an investor for 40 months. So we'll get a lump sum now. Out of the $15,000, we'll pay $8,300 to pay that other note off. The rest we're just going to pocket for other investments, and then we just wait 40 months, and then we start getting our payments back again.
Yeah, and Kevin, they could have sold $10,000 worth of the note, or they could have sold $12,000 or $15,000 or $20,000, right?
Right.
They could have picked different numbers, all of which would have meant they would have sold a different amount of payments. But they just ran a math calculation, and they said, they learned this at note school, by the way.
Uh-huh.
They ran a math calculation, and they said, $15,000 at 12% annual interest on their investors' money, which is a great deal for the passive investor, and we're going to sell him 40 months. That gave them the $8,300 to pay off the underlying mortgage. But wait a minute. Now they walked out of there with money in their pocket, right? They not only made money at down payment, they not only made money every month, but they walked out of there making profit up front, plus they didn't sell the whole entire payments due on the note.
Yeah, so what I did here, if you went back and calculated the total payout, cash out, and that includes the $8,300 to pay off the note, the $500 to fix it, or to clean it out, I should say, the $500 down, the 5 months of payments. Ironically enough, that number comes out to what their initial cash offer was, if you recall. It comes out to $10,000. So total cash out for them was $10,000. So this is the sale of the real estate. The sale of the note comes to $21,750. So that's all cash in. And then, of course, because they didn't sell all of the payments of that note, they only sold 40 of them, there was still another 75 payments left, which will be another $34,000 that they'll receive after investor blue, if you will, gets paid off. And running all those numbers and netting that out, you're looking at a profit of $45,800 on that deal.
This is why you do notes, okay? Because to buy low, sell high isn't always the best way to do it. You know, when they bought the property with financing and they sold it with financing, they made profit at the time they sold it, net of about, what was that, Kevin, $5,700?
Right.
Well, they were only going to make $8,000 if they just bought it and resold it.
Yeah, this was the original plan.
Yeah.
17 and try to turn around and sell it real quick as is for 25 cash.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Would you take, I'm saying this to the audience, I know you would. Would you take $5,700 today and get a check for a long time and an upside of making more lump sum profit in the future, like they ended up doing, or would you rather just take $8,000 and cut and run?
Right.
I'm thinking this is what Kevin, you and I call being a deal architect. This is the difference between buy low, sell high, and understanding the potential of being a deal architect.
Yeah, no question, and I like the way this illustrates that because there were multiple creative aspects to this. Just as a recap, first of all, a lot of people, when they make cash offers, that's it. They get so stuck in the cash offer mode, they don't think in terms. This was a much better deal for them, only to come out of pocket $500 and then a couple $100 a month. This was a much sweeter deal, but they promoted seller financing to the seller. They were the ones who suggested it. They said, look, we'll pay you, as you said, we'll pay you your price, but we get to pick the terms on this deal. They promoted that. Most real estate buyers don't do that. They just try to get caught up in price and they haggle there. So they did a great job by structuring that deal and promoting the seller finance on this. And then they took that another step further where they said, okay, now that we own this place, we're going to turn around and sell it to somebody else, but let's make it easy for them as well. Let's get their price up to what the property is worth, where they can see a good long-term return, but we'll finance it for them. They don't have to come out of pocket $45,000 or try to go to a bunch of banks and get turned down. So they promoted seller financing from both sides, the buying side to get in and the selling side to get out. And creating that wraparound note gave them that positive extra cash flow that they received every month on the spread here, which was great. They could move on to other deals. Then the creativeness of saying, you know what, we don't have to pay this loan off, but you know what, maybe we should, and let's pay them at a discount because they want their cash now. We'll pay them at a discount, and then not coming out of pocket and just sell another partial here. It was just a perfect play. So they just really parlayed this, if you will. They just went from one technique to another technique, and at the end of the day on this deal, they really weren't out of pocket more than $1,000 at any time, because if you remember, of this cash out number, $8,300 is the biggest chunk of it, and the $8,300 was really money that didn't have to come out of their checkbook, if you will. It was just selling an asset that they had. So they really had very little money throughout this deal. They controlled the deal through the paper and ended up making a lot more money on this than they ever would have just turning around and doing the old flip. I mean, 8,000 versus 45,800 is a pretty significant difference.
You don't need a calculator, do you? You know,
well, that becomes, Eddie, I mean, how many of these do you have to do before it really starts to make an impact? Because we've seen retail investors making $8,000 a pop. Okay, that's good, and maybe you're doing one a month, or maybe you're doing 6 a year or something like that. Versus how many of these type of deals can you start getting on with a lot less money out of your pocket and have them going simultaneously?
Well, there's two or three things working here. The Winberries found a good deal. Okay, they found a deal you could make money on. All right, they found a motivated seller that inherited the house, wasn't in the fix and flip business, certainly didn't understand how to go owner finance it to a consumer. You and I know they darn sure wouldn't have never found a realtor to go put all that together for them.
Right.
So this seller just initially says, "I want to sell it. I don't, and this isn't my business." And so they did a good job of finding a good motivated seller. I mean, let's give them all the credit for that, because without the good motivated seller, you don't have a deal here, right? But what they did is they understood the distinction between just buying for cash as low as the guy would agree to it, and selling it for cash for as high as somebody else would agree to it, okay, and making an $8,000 profit. Instead, they understood this guy was hung up on price, and they didn't want to pay the 17. They wanted to pay 10. They might have agreed to 12 or whatever, right? But they wanted to. They were trying to, get it bought as cheap as they could, and in that process, they smelled an opportunity because the guy was stuck on price. He wasn't stuck on all cash. He was stuck on price. So when they did that, okay, well then we'll just get him to owner finance it, and he'll get payments over time. And by the way, the guy was getting his monthly payments every month. The Winberries were doing everything they promised they would do. So he was getting his $200 or his $230 check every month. Yeah, He was getting a check and he was fine. Now, Kevin, most people, in fact, virtually all the people that are on this training don't have the experience that I do on this subject, because I've bought about 30,000 seller finance notes.
Right. Okay?
So people start wondering what if and why and whatever, and the truth of the matter is, this guy, it probably, in my guess, at the point he was selling it, he probably emotionally just said, if I can't get this, I'm not going to sell it. Now, I don't know what the heck he'd have done with it, but he was stuck on price. Then all of a sudden, he got his down payment, he's getting his $237 every month, and after 5 months, he had some other business opportunity or tuition for his kids, or needed to trade cars. I don't know why he needed the money.
Right.
He come to him and said, "Hey, would you cash me out?" And then he wasn't so stuck on price. He was kind of that chapter in his emotional book, so to speak, wasn't as burning anymore. And he just said, I just don't want to keep collecting the money. Now, they had the legal obligation to pay him every month, but they didn't have the legal obligation to pay him any more than that every month.
Right.
So he realized he was going to get the 237 till they got it paid out, another 79 months. And he said, you know what? I don't want to do that. Write me a check for $8,300, and we didn't go into the deep dive of all the interaction back and forth. But knowing the Winberries, they're very straight-spoken people. They're very fair, and they're not going to lie to you for sure. And they just probably said, this is where we are, and if it works for you, fine. If we don't, we'll just keep paying you. You know, if he wouldn't have taken that discounted payoff, what happens if they'd have paid him another 5 payments, you know, and then would he have taken the payoff then? So time was in their advantage, right? They were doing everything they promised. He just got anxious for the money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's sometimes when a deal is made. On the other end, they had sold the house to somebody that wanted to live in this house and made a good down payment, what you and I would call skin in the game, Kevin. So they paid a good down payment. They successfully made the 5 payments. Then they found a passive investor that just said, "Look, I'll write a check for," they presented it, Mr. Investor, write your check for $15,000. It's going to be serviced it's going to be serviced with a service company. You really don't have to do anything. You're going to get, and this green note, remember that their receiving payment zone is like $454 a month. So the investor funds $15,000, gets $454 a month for 40 months, which is effectively an interest rate on his investment of 12% per year. It's kind of like going to the bank and telling the bank you want 12% interest on a CD.
Good luck with that one. Yeah.
Exactly, so that was a phenomenal deal for the investor that bought the 40 payments on the note. Remember, they paid off the guy that inherited the house, that owner financed it for them. They paid him off with the $8,300, so his loan is no longer on the property; it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So now the blue represents here just the partial 40-month payment term that they sold to the private investor. And then obviously you see when the blue runs out, then the Winberries start collecting their $454 again a month. But when they sold the note, it gave them enough money to not only pay off the note but make additional money, and that's where you came up with the down payment, and the additional proceeds from selling the partial on the note was the $21,000.
Right.
So the answer is, Kevin, people ask us all the time, what do you guys do at Note School? You got these classes, and what's that work, and what's that look like? And what we have found is this. This was, I don't want to say complicated, but this was a pretty creative transaction. And
I know what you mean. It can have the appearance of being complicated. Yeah.
So we could easily go back and slow it down, pull up the calculator, play some what ifs. You could do this, you could do this. So we didn't do all of that today. But this is a fairly good representation of kind of what we can do in a class. People said, a 3-day class, what the heck would you do? Well, figure out how to carve up deals like this. And
we've got some coming up here. I just put that on the screen there, Eddie, but go ahead.
Yeah, people ask about this, and this isn't like go sign up today or whatever, here in the webinar, and that isn't what this training is about. But we do want to just make a list of these classes. We have 2 separate classes. One class is on buying non-performing notes, and you've heard us say that there is literally millions and millions of non-performing notes that are now being sold as non-performing notes versus the banks foreclosing and selling them as bank foreclosed properties, right? REO, real estate owned. So the banks have kind of changed their habits, and the habit today is they're selling these non-performing notes. Not very long ago, Kevin, they wrote an article about Note School and the online version of the Wall Street Journal, right?
Yeah, Market Watch. Mm-hmm.
Market Watch came out with an article a couple of weeks ago, and about us and this business of buying non-performing notes. So that's what that class is about. We call it Big Money from Bad Debts. So a little sheet here just says big money, but that's about buying non-performing notes. The other class is about either buying or creating performing notes, and we call that rich rewards in real estate notes. So an example of what we did here today was we showed you a creative owner finance technique of how to create notes. So sometimes we talk about buying notes and then buying them and then the possibility of reselling them. And sometimes we talk about selling a property with owner financing because it's so much more advantageous to do it that way than just sell it for cash. And this is, you know, the Winberries did 2 or 3 of these things all in the same transaction that we went over here today. And what I believe is this, Kevin. I believe that all of this continual conversation and communication about the note space today, that's really because of inventory. You agree with that? I mean, it's just because there's just a massive amount of inventory out there.
Oh, no question. Inventory and you know, in the case of the seller finance notes and the big uptick in that because of the unintended consequences to some of these new regulations.
Yeah. So this is not a short-lived deal. There's a massive amount of inventory. Until DoddFrank gets resolved, owner financing is going to have a big factor in the market because the banks aren't making these loans, and it's really because of the regulatory environment. So there's market reasons that the note space is become such a target. Well, literally, for them to write an article in Market Watch, which is writes about all kind of financial service market issues, way more than just real estate, and certainly way more than buying discounted defaulted notes.
Right.
But it's become a topic today. And what I would say to you is this: get yourself prepared to understand how to act on opportunities. Understand when you're making the best deal you can make and what your options are, like the Winberries did. And that is just the market is what the market is, and this note inventory is incredible. Then do what the Winberries did and talk about learn how to talk about different strategies that are going to get you to where you want to get to. So,
yeah, because they could have done, if we broke this deal, down, the Winberries would have been fine if they just bought the place on seller financing. They could have gone in a different direction with it and rented that out. They could have just been collecting that passive cash flow on the wrap and not cash out the other loan. So you're right. There just more techniques in there that work pretty seamlessly. They can appear complex, but when you break them down, it's just like putting it, architecting a deal together. It was not difficult as far as the pieces they put in there.
Yeah. So our design is that we're having these trainings. I don't know if we call it a series or we just regularly having these trainings in this format. So last time, Kevin, we did one on hardest hit funds, which relates to buying non-performing notes. Mm-hmm. Today we did one on buying and reselling with seller financing, and then the twist of selling part of the payments of the note they created. This is all performing notes, right? So it varies from time to time, and we'll continue to do this. And just make your real estate investing and your note investing business utilize these techniques because they drastically will affect the outcome of how you do your business. Mr. Shortell, you did an awesome job of putting together a story there because that was had some twist to it, but you presented it was really good. I want to compliment you on that, and that's why you keep helping us out with this curriculum.
You bet.
You guys have a great day.
All right, everybody, and we've got time here to stick around and answer some questions for you here. There's quite a number of questions in the queue, if you will, so I'm going to start going through from top to bottom. There's some repetitive questions, so I'll put those together as well here. Just waiting on my, got a little bit of a lag on my internet today. Not sure why. It's usually very seamless, but I'm having a little trouble opening up the questions there. So let's see. It closed on me, and now I can't see it. Well, I do remember some of the questions that I saw as we were going through that, and many of them were in regards to, there we go, many of them were in regards to where do we find these other investors for the partial. So, you know, again, in this deal, it did have a lot of parts that, if you're unfamiliar with this, they look difficult perhaps from the outside, but they simply went from strategy to strategy to strategy on this. So let me go back, instead of answering that partial question right now, go back to the top, as I said, because I've got those questions answered or up now. First was, how do you handle the closing costs on these deals? Sent in by Jennifer. And the closing costs on the real estate side of this transaction are just like any other real estate transaction, right? You get the settlement statement, the HUD-1 form, as some people call it, and your closing costs are normal there. On the note side of the business, the closings are quite different, dramatically different than the regular real estate. In fact, at the note closing, there's actually only 2 documents that are created, and they're typically just 1-page documents each. They could be 2 pages, but they're very, very small considering sitting down at real estate closings and signing page after page after page. So these note closings are much more simple. The closing costs would be a nominal fee for if you're having a real estate attorney close it, if you are using a local title company. So you're looking at less than $500 in total cost to close a note deal. If the 2 parties, you know, were competent enough and felt comfortable enough to do the closing on their own, they could do that literally with no cost. But assuming you want a third party to make sure that everything is set, then it's a very, very nominal cost to do that. All right, let's see the next one here. How and where did they find this deal? Scott sent this in, and again, they found this deal just as regular real estate investors. They were simply looking for discounted property, and they found a motivated seller. This seller inherited the property. Parent had passed away, left it to this person, and this person really just wanted to get rid of it, and that was the bottom line. So I'm sure there's some investors who are on this call that deal in probate investing and foreclosures and those sorts of things. So they found the deal through the traditional real estate methods because that's where they came from, but they were able to take that and then expand upon their profit and the deal by adding in the financial component, which is the note side of the business. Sanders asking, could they have done this deal through a self-directed IRA? And the answer is yes. Real estate investing, real estate note investing, both are allowable investments through the self-directed IRAs. All you have to do is make sure you structure it properly. That's all, and that's where you work with your trustee, you work with your custodian to help you with those. Let's see. Let's see what would happen here. Hang on one second. I'm clicking through these. What is the marketplace for partials to be sold? In your example, where did these students go to find the buyer who bought the 40 payments for the 15K? The partial buyers come from however you market those folks, I guess is the broadest term of that. What I mean by that is this. We have a number of students that have now, including the Winberries, by the way, now that I mention that, the Winberries put together a meetup group that started over a year and a half ago, and they now have over 200 people a month meeting in their meetup group. So their club took off like crazy. We have other students doing that same format. We have other students utilizing their circle of influence, if you will, other investors looking for alternative opportunities to the stock market. So we've got those folks doing that. We have students who do presentations. For example, I got an email today from a student who just did a presentation for about 20 investors, and he's got about 6 of them that are now wanting to move forward and do some deals with him. So most people are finding those sources on their own. And of course, at Note School, we do have a collective group of investors, and many of our students end up doing these transactions together as well. So they build a relationship with the pool investors, most of which I think are going outside and building their own pools. But of course, we do have students who work amongst each other. Let's see. Yep, same question there. Let's see. What are the best states to buy notes in? Was another question here. And you know what? There really is no best state. In this business, you go for the best deals. And for example, I'm in Orlando, Florida. Okay, our office is in Texas. I work out of Orlando, Florida. And you buy you buy notes in any state where they find the best deal. We just did a training in San Francisco last weekend. Most of those investors will not buy deals in California. It's much more expensive, and there's much greater opportunities in other places. I can tell you in general geographic terms is if you're looking for the best deals, the deepest discounts, and the greatest amount of opportunity right now in this marketplace, you're going to find that throughout the Midwest and the Southeast. So geographically, those are probably the strongest states. But having said that, would we buy notes in the Northeast, the Southwest, the Northwest? You bet. We look at these as deals. Where's the best deal? It doesn't really matter where the asset is located. Let's see. I had some questions here on what happens if this deal goes bad. In other words, let's say that the Winberries are collecting the payments from the rehab investor, and then of course they're making their payment on the wraparound. Now, first of all, wraparound mortgages are typically a temporary situation. It would be unique for a wraparound to go long term. It's something that's normally just a temporary fix, and then you pay out that underlying first mortgage. And in this particular case, that payoff of the first mortgage was really promoted, if you will, by that note holder who just wanted to get cashed out. But if that note holder didn't do that, I think the Winberries eventually would have paid him out of that equation anyhow. But you know, the deal is what it is. So it was paid off. So the question becomes, well, what if that other rehab investor stops making the payments? Well, it's like anything else. If you stop making the payments on your loan, what happens? Well, they enforce the security agreement. And the security agreement either means that it's going to be a judicial or non-judicial foreclosure. So the end game could be the foreclosure process. Of course, we can also get a deed in lieu, right? So if the rehab investor wasn't able to make the payments now, all of a sudden the Winberries would have to at least start pursuing the foreclosure, but chances are they could probably renegotiate and get a deed in lieu, get the property back, and then just sell it to somebody else. And now they take back a property that's been rehabbed, and they move forward. If they had to take it to foreclosure, then they would take it that way and get the property back, more than likely at that sale, or possibly even cashed out at the sale if somebody outbid what was owed on the property, which would be unlikely. All right, let's see what else we have here. How did students find someone willing to buy the property for almost after repair value with more than 10% down and 7.5% interest? Well, once again, how did the Winberries sell this to another investor? This other investor rehabs property but also looks at long term. So this particular investor, what was good for them, which may not be how you're looking at this deal, Jennifer, but what was good for them was they're out of pocket very little money. So they're keeping a lot more money to do the rehab. think if they had to pay all cash for this deal. So if this rehab investor had to come up with all cash and the Winburys weren't going to finance this, they might have gotten a better price, but their cash outlay would have been significantly more. Here, the investor was able to keep their cash outlay small, utilize those funds for rehab, and then eventually, you know what, there's nothing that says that they can't pay that loan off early. So in the event that they did decide or were able to get another loan from a bank or private lender, then they could have pursued that as well and cashed out of that other loan. But they had their idea set on, we're going to keep this as a long-term rental. So that investor was not looking at it through the same lens, as you will, for an investor who's going to renovate the property, turn around, and just resell it. And what you'll find if you start to look at rental rates, once again, throughout the Midwest and Southeast, you're going to find that rental rates are constantly increasing. They're starting to plateau now, but they have increased drastically based upon the price of the property. So those type of investors don't just look at comparable sales, if you will. They always look at the income that's produced from the property as well. So their value equation's a little bit different than an investor who's just looking to make a quick buck. CB was asking about the classes. Obviously, you've got that on your screen. You can also always go to noteschool.com and click on the Why Attend button, and we have a calendar there as well for all of our upcoming classes. Do these students have a Dodd-Frank problem because they're financing an owner-occupied home? Another question here. Dodd-Frank, there's a lot of confusion about Dodd-Frank. A lot of people are scared off by it. There's misinformation, and part of it rightfully so. Dodd-Frank is a horrible piece of legislation that was not written in specifics. That's my biggest problem with it. They passed a lot of these laws or ideas of what they wanted these laws to be, but they haven't finalized the details. So they pass this enormous amount of legislation that has a wide and deep effect without specifics. In my opinion, that's ridiculous, and it's flat out irresponsible. So of the 500 potential new laws with Dodd-Frank, less than half really have already been instated, and the rest are still in the interpretation phase. So certainly that's going to lead to some confusion. But here's the bottom line. If we're selling a property using seller financing, and we are selling that to a consumer, Dodd-Frank may or may not have an influence. Well, if it's may or may not, let's default on the side of it may. So here's the deal. What's required is that you run their credit, you look at their financials to show that they can afford this property. That's really what it comes down to. If it will always boil down to it is, can they afford this property, and did you do your proper due diligence with them to see that they could afford the property? Well, guess what? Eddie's been in this business over 34 years. I got started in this business 20-some-odd years ago. Anytime we did seller financing for someone, we always did that. We always ran their credit. We always looked at their financials. We didn't want to get stuck holding a non-performing note from a borrower in the get-go. The whole point was to get a performing note. So Dodd-Frank hasn't changed anything that we do for seller financing at all, because we've been creating seller finance notes the right way. It's kind of like if you're a landlord on this call right now, and let's say some new legislation came down and said, okay, before you can rent to somebody, you have to run their credit and you have to do a financial check to see if they can afford it. Well, I think every landlord who's on this webinar right now would agree, well, duh, we've been doing that. We have to do that. We don't want to get a tenant in our unit and they can't afford to pay. So the note business is the same thing. So Dodd-Frank really didn't change the way the true professionals do the business anyhow. All right, how are we doing on time? Okay, can we show the calculation on this? And absolutely, you could do this on a financial calculator, and you do have to use a financial calculator, not a regular calculator, because you have to take into the consideration of time. And one of the things that we do at our classes is just that. We utilize spreadsheets to show you how to do the calculations that way. We show you on financial calculators how to do that. To do that on this webinar right now would take a bit of explaining, a bit of time for folks, and unfortunately we don't have that right now. But good idea for us to do another webinar just on that topic of how do you come up with these calculations, because certainly the number part of this equation is an important one. The number part and the people part is an important one on here. Let's see. What is the effective marketing method to find these types of note sellers? What is the most effective marketing method to find these type of note sellers who are open to this concept? Well, interesting enough, 20 some odd years ago, for me to find note sellers who were interested in cashing out of all or part of their note, I had to go to the courthouse, physically go to the courthouse, and those were back in the days where it was in big books or it was on microfiche, and I would spend hours going through there and searching for individual note owners. Well, obviously today with the advent of technology and the internet, there are computer programs that search all of this stuff. So there are database companies that you could literally buy the name, address, and phone number of individual note owners. In fact, many of you on this call, I'm sure everybody on this call has heard of Experian. Experian sells seller carryback lead lists. So they're not hard to find today at all. You can pay a little bit of money and buy as many of those names and addresses as you would like. Now, what you'll find is not all note owners know that they can sell their note. Number one, not all note owners know that they could sell a part of their note. Certainly that's going to be a rarity, so that's where you come into play with the knowledge base on that. All right, what else do we have here? The seller. Okay, got the Dodd-Frank. I'm just scrolling through some of the other questions. Looks like there's some repeated questions in here. Yep, training in Fort Worth, got one. We got the Rich Rewards in Fort Worth, but yep, keep an eye on that calendar. We'll be back out in that area for the other one. Northeast, yeah, we do trainings in the Northeast. As you can see, we only schedule a month or two out. So if you don't see a location nearby you, and you don't want to travel, kind of hang in there, keep checking the schedule. It's at noteschool.com, and we have a calendar on there of our upcoming events. Peter's saying, what is the minimum cash investment I need to get started with note investing? Well, the answer could be as little as a couple $100. It depends what you want to do. This business can deliver a lot of things. It can deliver positive monthly cash flow without landlord responsibility or liability. It can produce lump sum cash. It can do both. It can also produce what we call fee income. And income is a way that you can make money in this business without buying a note yourself. And that's basically putting buyer and seller together. And just to give an example, had a guy in Asheville, North Carolina. Oh, it was a month or two ago, but he just kind of stood out in my mind when you asked that question. And he made $12,000 in less than a week just by putting a buyer and us, the seller, together, and was able to make a nice fee on the 3 notes that the other investor purchased by way of him. So there's a lot of ways that you can do this business to get started. For those who do have capital to invest, obviously we can take you to a whole different level. All right. 2 documents. What are the 2 documents that are created at the closing of a note? Very simple. When you buy a note, you're buying the IOU, which is the note itself, and the security agreement. Okay, that security agreement might be a mortgage, a deed of trust, or a land contract. So we always buy secured notes. We don't just buy notes. It's called the note business, but the reality is we buy the note and the security agreement. So the 2 new documents that are created at the closing is the selling party of the note and the security agreement signing over to you both the note and the security agreement. So there'll be an assignment of the note and there'll be an assignment of the security agreement from them to you. Those are the 2 documents. Can this be done? Should this be done through an LLC? If you're really going to do this business and you're going to do it on a regular basis and as a professional in business, absolutely. Form an LLC. Can you make some fee income in the business and get started without forming a company? Sure, because there's really no liability in acting as an agent, if you will. I hate to use that word, but acting as an agent between a buyer and a seller there. A consultant, I prefer. But that's what you would do if you plan on really doing this. Yeah, absolutely form a company. And let's see. Trying to get time for just a few more here. Yeah, the Jim's asking about what are the forms here. Was there an agreement? I'll kind of paraphrase on your question there, Jim. Was there an agreement between Brian and Michelle Winberry and the investor who bought the 40 payments? Absolutely. It's a partial sale agreement. So in regular real estate, we have a purchase and sale agreement. In the note business, we have a purchase and sale agreement. So same kind of concept here. It's just in this business, if you've got 120 payments remaining, you can sell all 120 payments or any number of future payments. So you don't have to sell the entire note. You can keep what we call in the business the back end. But is there an agreement? Absolutely. It's a purchase and sale agreement. And then in the details, it shows how many payments are being purchased. You got it. All right. Who can help with self-directed IRAs? A lot of self-directed IRA companies out there. You've got Equity Trust, you've got Quest. There's quite a number out there. As a note holder, taxes, insurance. Taxes and insurance. Yeah, sometimes with seller financing, the person making the payments on the note, the borrower, we'll have it arranged where there's an escrow. So what happens is there's that servicing party involved, and the servicing party would collect the monthly payment, which may include principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, just like a regular loan, because that's really all it is. It's just not a bank-originated loan. So that's very similar. That's the same. If it's not being escrowed, then what do? All you do is check every year to make sure the taxes and insurance are being paid. Some documents force it to be paid, or if they don't, they could be foreclosed upon for that. That's under what's called a land contract, which we don't have time to go into here. All righty, still got a lot of questions coming in on this, but we're running out of time here. I tried to get through as many as I possibly could, and let's see if there's one other one in here that's a poignant question here. Okay. Do we teach how to make marketable notes? Yeah, absolutely. There's about 6 different things that go into the valuation of a note. And that we go into detail, but in brief, it's the borrower's strength, it's the property itself, the terms of the payback, the amount of seasoning on the note, meaning the payment history, the paperwork behind it. Was it created in compliance? Yeah, there's 6 different things that we identify and go into for detail. And in fact, that's another good idea. And thanks for that, Randy. That's another good idea for us to create one of these other webinars here. So I know I've kept you all long on this call, and do appreciate you sticking there with us. I tried to get it to as many questions as I possibly could. If I didn't get to yours, we do apologize for that. But make sure you stay in tune. We plan on doing several more of these, and I know many of you asked about playbacks and those sorts of things. I don't know at this point in time if and when we have those scheduled, but stay in touch with us through however you contacted us, through social media or whatever that may be, and we will let you know when and if those are scheduled. So thanks everybody once again for your time, attention. Hope you learned some things, and hope to see you out there at a training as soon as you possibly can. Thanks again. Have a great day.